So we're week 2 here. We're going to be doing koshering the kitchen and other similar items this week. Last week we did foods items, and you can ask questions about all types of things. It doesn't just have to be on this, but I'll go through this and then we'll take some time for questions as you need. Okay, so the first things are, how do I kosher? And there's a number of items, but probably the number one item that is on everyone's mind is koshering your stovetop, especially if you have a glass stovetop, like these new Corningware tops or other similar ones. So there are lots of opinions by lots of different people as to what you can do. So in my studies and speaking to some other rabbis, that the answer for this question is that you are able to kosher the glass tops on your stoves for Pesach or for the year, and you kosher it by putting the burners on full, first cleaning it, then putting the burner on full, and then wiping it down after it's heated up to the highest it can be. But what you have to keep in mind, that on those stovetops, you have only koshered where the burner is. The rest of the stovetop is not kosher at all. If you've bought a house that has that on there, so it's not kosher at all, the rest of it. So you have to put like pot warmers or things down on top. Do not put aluminum foil or things on your stovetops. You'll ruin it. So you just have to make sure that you only put your pots on the burners if you use this on Pesach, or if you put like these cork or wooden things down that you put under your pot. You can put that, you take it off the burner and put it on that to cool. But you can't put it directly on the glass top, because the rest of the glass top where there is no burner is considered chametz, because you use it all year and you use it for chametz and stuff spills on it, and we don't have a way of cleaning those. There is a way of doing so, but it's not, most of the time when you do it, it breaks, because you have to make them hot, and you have to use boiling water, and it cracks. And I don't advise it, so I'm not even going to tell you the details of how. It's not worth it, because you'll end up having to replace your stove Erev Pesach, and that's not fun. Okay, so easier ones are gas and electric. And gas and electric are pretty similar in how you kosher them. Now this is a stove top we're talking about, not your oven yet. So stove top with gas or electric, you first have to clean it, right? And the actual burner itself, where it is, you turn them on full and you allow them to get to the highest possible heat that they can so that they glow red. Then you can just let them cool down and wipe them off, and they become kosher by doing it that way.
How long do they have to
Not long at all, just a couple minutes after it's full on as high as it can go.
Do you have to change the thing that you're wiping it with? Because the first thing you wiped it with might have chametz on it, and then you burn it, and you're wiping it again. So
Well, you'd wait till it cools, so you don't necessarily have to do that.
like you don't have to change the cloth or anything?
No, not necessary. But what you do need to change are the drop pans that are underneath, especially the gas and electric stoves, where the food that spills off your pot will go into. You have to either replace those or cover those with aluminum foil. Replacing them is just a couple dollars. There's not much to it. But you have to replace them or cover them. It's probably better to replace them. The same thing with the rings. You have the rings that go around it. So those rings you have to either cover or replace as well. You could replace every part that surrounds your burner on an electric stove for less than $10. But if you want to cover them, you certainly can. But you need to, because they have not become kosher by your heating it. All that became kosher are the burners themselves, so that now you can cook on them.
What about the screws? You know how we take out the screws to clean them and everything? Do you have to boil them?
No, they're not. The screws aren't on the element. They're just underneath the element to hold it in. No, you don't.
Can I just go back to the glass top?
Sure.
If you don't use the top,
Right.
but you want to use it as a counter surface, would you just put boiling water?
No, then I suggest you just put something on it.
But what happens is that the oven actually gets hot, and then the surface gets hot. So if you
Right.
cover it, you don't.
Right, but you
want
see, if you
something
put
to burn.
boiling water on it, it really only will affect it if you heat up the glass as well, and then it'll crack. So it becomes a problem. So maybe you could get something that won't melt, like a cork, or some other object that wouldn't happen to. I'm not sure what that would be. What type of substance.
Last year I bought just electric burners to use instead of using the glass stovetop, but you can't use the surface.
Okay, so you could do that. That's no different than using the burner and not the rest. You can do that, but you can't put the food directly on the stovetop afterwards.
So, okay.
right? Because as soon as you take a hot pot and you put it on that stovetop, you have now whatever was in the stovetop has now gone into your pot. Okay, so you can use it no different than you would use anything, but you shouldn't put any food stuff directly on it. Any food stuff, any pots, anything like that, right? Because it can convey it.
So on a gas or electric top, the parts in between that can be used?
So the parts in between, you can kosher them depending on what they are. Either you can kosher them with boiling water depending on the material, or what is the most common is that people put aluminum foil over those areas, which is probably the smartest thing. Because by putting the aluminum foil over it, then you don't have access to it. And aluminum foil is not a problem because you're using real heat, like you're using fire, like either electric or gas, and therefore the aluminum foil is fine with it. Right, so where you have to be careful, which we'll deal with, is in your oven when you start playing around with aluminum foil. But we'll get to that when we talk about ovens. Yeah.
When we are cleaning the knobs, do we need to put foil on those as well?
And if the knobs are below the oven or below the stove, then you don't. But if they're above it, then you should cover them, because you see the whole idea is like this. There's no magic here. It boils down to, during the entire year, we have food all over our ovens. We don't think twice in, let's say, October, that we have chametz in this pot, and it just spilt on the dial, and now we have a problem. We don't think about it. We don't think about chametz that way. We only think about chametz around now. So therefore, unless you guard your stove all year, you have to presume it has chametz in it. Right? You know it's kosher because you guard it all year from that. But we don't take the time to guard it all year from chametz. So therefore, you have to check these things, right? Okay. So you'd clean them, because behind the dials you'll find stuff.
We boil them. That I know, but I mean, you want us to put foil over them as well.
Well, you wouldn't have to do both. I don't know if you need to boil them, but foil is probably preferable. But if you clean it the way you just said, it would be fine, because you're not putting food on it. It's just you want to make sure there is no food that's in it that's going to fall out. Okay.
If you put foil and you couldn't really see when you turn the knob.
So then you don't put foil on that one. Right? It has to be practical. Right? You have to do it in a practical manner. Okay, so in general, that's a stove top. Right? That's gas, electric, and we've also now talked about the infrared and the glass ones. Okay, those are stove tops. When we talk about let's talk about the oven, because I don't have a special one in here. So oven itself, the most effective thing to do with an oven is to self-clean it. Self-cleaning an oven makes it kosher. You just self-clean it and then wipe it out, and it's clean. The issues arise with the racks inside of the oven. So most people will cover their racks in aluminum foil, because often they don't want to leave their racks inside when they kosher it. If you do, it will become kosher, but they may become ruined. It depends on which racks you use. They will become kosher as long as they're clean when you put them in and you kosher it there. So then
we don't need to cover the rack.
No, then you wouldn't have to. But most people do cover racks. There's a couple of points to remember. If you are going to put aluminum foil in your oven, number one is make sure the aluminum foil is wrapped well around what you're putting it in, because if it touches the elements, then your elements very well could break. Then you need to replace your element on Erev Pesach. It's also not fun. The other thing is that ovens are made like refrigerators, and we'll talk about this when we get to refrigerators, and that the racks have holes in them. And one of the reasons for the racks having holes is the circulation of the air assists in the cooking. It's anticipated that that air will be able to circulate, and therefore the food will cook better because of that. If you cover everything inside and the air cannot circulate through the racks, it will affect your cooking. And you may not realize that that's why. So you need to be very careful with aluminum foil. Number one, that you have it tightly on the things, and secondly, you can put holes in it where the air is. You don't put giant holes, but you can put holes in it, because the holes in it itself are not going to harm it. Right? But aluminum foil is one way you can do it if you don't buy new racks or kosher the racks.
What about the door?
So the door is really the same. When you kosher the oven, you have to first make sure that all food is taken out of it, and then the door will become kosher as well.
So you don't need to wash it? I'm sorry.
Before you kosher it, you wash it.
Oh, no, I know, but you don't need to we unscrew it as well, and clean the screws and the glass. And
all of those areas that we do things like that are good things to do, but they're not necessarily necessary. Because if you have, for instance, your glass and it's screwed in, right? And the only way that you can get the food out of it is by unscrewing it. Then the only way you can get the food into it is by unscrewing it, right? In other words, if it's that tight,
It just gets discolored.
right? So,
It's unedible.
yeah, well, that's for sure it's unedible, but we still try to go beyond the letter of the law. Yes.
What about those of us who don't have self-cleaning oven?
So then you have to clean your oven the same way.
And then do it, how long do we have to heat?
Well, you would heat it on the highest possible heat. You would go through the cleaning process as it says, and that's all you have to do. Because the cleaning process is more than enough to do it. Here's the rule. For Pesach or for kosher, the rule is the same. The amount of heat that it takes for something to enter the walls of your oven or your pots is the same amount of heat you need to take it out. That's how it works. Whatever causes it to go in has it come out, the same amount. So if you can get your oven to the highest possible temperature it's ever gotten to, then that will take anything out of it, and then you just wipe it out.
Including the racks.
So if the racks are totally clean and they're all metal, yes.
Do you do them simultaneously?
Yeah, you can do it all at once. Okay, let's talk about your refrigerator. Okay?
How about toaster
Yes.
ovens?
So toaster ovens are legally the same as an oven, but pragmatically are advised not to use, because by definition they are used almost exclusively for bread and chametz and so forth. You should clean it even if you don't use it, but it's suggested not to use them because of that, and because they're so easy to have chametz in, right? More so than most other appliances. So the refrigerator, you do not cook in your refrigerator, so you do not need to do as much as you'd think otherwise. Like you do not and you should not cover the racks of your refrigerator with aluminum foil or contact paper. You shouldn't do it, and you don't have to do it.
They have these plastic things.
You can buy whatever you want for it, but you're basically, if you take the food out of your refrigerator and you clean your refrigerator so there is no food in it, it's been cleaned like new, and then you put your racks back in, there is no food in it. Right? You don't cook in there. It's just food, right? It's gone now. So you're allowed to use your refrigerator. If you want to put something like that in there, you can, right? But in general, we don't cook in our refrigerators. We use them for cool things. So there is no need to go beyond simply cleaning it. And if you put aluminum foil in your refrigerator, there is a very good chance you will break the refrigerator, because the refrigerator requires the circulation of air between the various levels, and when you put the aluminum foil in it, it will stop the circulation of air, and it's much more necessary in a refrigerator than it is in an oven. In the case of the oven, it'll affect your cooking, but it won't hurt the oven. In the case of the refrigerator, it will hurt your refrigerator. So you need to be very careful with that. And putting aluminum foil in there is unnecessary. Contact paper is unnecessary. You just clean it, right? If we think about it, right, sometimes we get confused between the laws of cleaning and magic, right? We sometimes go a little bit too far. And it's not necessary. Logic tells us that in a refrigerator, if you clean it, it's clean, right? It's really clean. There's nothing in it. You can go into the crevices, you can go along the rubber seal and check for food and do all that. But after you've done that, you don't need to cover it. Right? You can just leave it as it is.
Even the sides, like the sides of the doors?
Yeah, as long as you clean it, like where the rubber is, you clean it, that there's no food there, right? Then you can do it. If you want to be very strict, you can put some bleach along the edges, and then any food that might be in there, the bleach will spoil. And then it would not be a problem, even if you miss something. Okay? A freezer is the same rule as a refrigerator. There's even less chance that you'll have a problem with it. If you're going to use your freezer on Pesach, you need to clean it, and you need to make sure there's not chametz in it. A question comes up all the time, and it's more of a question by freezers than refrigerators, is can you have a rack in your freezer for chametz and the rest of it for Pesach? Can you do that? Are you allowed to do that? So literally, you are allowed to. You can sell a rack within your freezer. Let's say the bottom rack, you can have bread in there. You can't see it. You have to put it in there. You have to close it. You have to cover it. So you shouldn't see it when you use it. But according to the letter of the law, you are allowed to use it in a freezer in such a way. In a refrigerator, while you may be allowed to, it's much more possible that food can get out because it's fresh. Things can happen to it. But it is legally allowed in the case of a freezer to do that. But it's not preferred. And it's preferred that you have a special area to keep the food in, separate. But if you only have one, you want to use the freezer for that, you can use a part of it. You're allowed to. You sell that part, you cover it so that you shouldn't see the chametz, and you leave it like that. A microwave oven is a debatable issue. There was for many years, and it's practiced by many, that a microwave oven needs to be cleaned, right? You clean it totally, and then you just put a glass of water into it, and you run it until the water steams up the inside of the microwave oven. Then you wipe it out, and it's kosher. That's exactly what you do if you would want to switch a microwave oven from milk to meat. If you had a need to do that, that's how you do it. It will work for Pesach. There's only a couple of caveats. There are some who say you cannot clean microwave ovens. So not everyone will accept that if they come to your home people really shouldn't be asking you how you clean your home, because there are different opinions and you're not doing anything wrong. But if they do, and they may not want to use it. But you also need to make sure that the glass that you use has to be a special glass. You can't have, there's a glass, not the glass they use for koshering it, the glass inside the microwave. Many microwaves have a glass tray, and that tray needs to be a kosher for Pesach tray, because food is put on that directly all the time and cooked on it directly all the time. And even though it doesn't use heat to cook, it uses the speeding up of molecules, the result is heat. And therefore, you need to find a way of using a different glass tray within your microwave during Pesach.
Okay, well, I have a Pesach tray for the microwave, which we have not used and the dogs use because we've been told not to use microwave. Can I use that glass tray, flesh, and have my everyday tray milk, as long as I label them?
Yeah, but the oven itself becomes milk or dairy, so it doesn't help you any.
Is there any way to like kosher the glass tray, like to boil water, like?
It's questionable because they're usually not regular glass. They're usually very tempered Pyrex glass, and those are questionable if they have a law of glass or a law of China. And therefore, we would not do that. So while there are many who allow using microwaves and koshering them as I described, you have to do it in such a manner. There are some who don't allow. It's normal to do it, to use them, but you have to use them accordingly.